Why? Behind what Trump is doing. The U.S. President, Donald Trump, assumed office on January 20, 2025.
That I will faithfully execute.
But his influence on the global order began much earlier, during his election campaign. Since taking office for a second term, he has made unprecedented decisions that were entirely unexpected, leaving the world to grapple with his intent. We have made an effort to make sense of these developments. So, join us as we explore the why behind what Trump is doing. NATO and EU. NATO's cohesion is increasingly fraying, particularly under Donald Trump, as growing tensions between the US and its European allies become more apparent. What occurred at the UNGA, where the US aligned itself with Russia and Belarus on a resolution condemning Russian aggression, clearly reveals deep fissures within the alliance. Trump's overt skepticism toward multilateralism has further strained transatlantic relations, as Vice President J.D. Vance lambasted European leaders at the Munich Security Conference for their inadequate support for Ukraine and lackluster defense efforts. He said that
for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense. The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within.
Trump is mounting pressure on NATO to increase their share for ensuring defense by a minimum allocation of 5% of their respective GDP.
I'm also going to ask all NATO nations to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, which is what it should have been years ago.
Even when the US itself spends not more than 3.4% of its GDP on defense. In case the US pulls out of NATO, Russia and China will emerge as the primary beneficiaries of this shift, and the EU may soon find itself capitulating. Ukraine. Trump vowed to end the war within days of assuming office, promising a swift resolution. His team held talks with Russian officials in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, yet, conspicuously, Ukraine, the aggrieved party, was excluded from the discussions. This exclusion aligns with Trump's contentious and arm-twisting approach, which has been marked by unorthodox tactics and controversial statements. Notably, he made highly questionable remarks about President Zelensky, comments that have drawn widespread criticism for their inaccuracy and disregard for the complexities of the conflict. Number 1.
But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could.
Lie number 2.
We have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, or essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating. Wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, it's been a long time since we've had an election?
Lie number 3.
Millions of Ukrainians and Russians have been needlessly killed or wounded in this horrific and brutal conflict. And we've spent perhaps $350 billion, like taking candy from a baby. That's what happened. And they've spent $100 billion. What a difference that is.
Tensions between the U.S. and Ukraine soared during a recent White House press conference, where President Zelensky clashed with Vice President J.D. Vance and President Trump. The root of the disagreement lies in Trump's apparent prioritization of securing rare earth minerals over providing genuine security guarantees to Ukraine or condemning Russia's unprovoked invasion. This underscores Trump's transactional foreign policy, which often places economic and strategic interests above Ukraine's sovereignty. In the aftermath of the heated exchange, the Trump administration froze crucial aid to Ukraine, threatening to worsen Kyiv's already dire situation in its fight against Russian aggression. This move leaves Ukraine more vulnerable to Russian airstrikes targeting civilian populations and vital infrastructure. In response, Zelensky, desperate for support, has signaled a willingness to quickly sign a mineral deal with the US, reflecting a shift toward prioritizing economic negotiations over military alliances. Israel-Hamas. The United States, under President Donald Trump, played a central role in shaping the terms of the agreement between Israel and Hamas. Trump's stern warnings to Hamas and Israel culminated in a ceasefire deal between them even before he assumed office. Trump made it clear that should Israel and Hamas fail to adhere to the deal's terms, the U.S. would not hesitate to act. In particular, Trump warned that if Hamas did not fulfill its obligation to release all hostages by the agreed deadline, the U.S. would take strong measures, including potentially canceling the ceasefire and escalating U.S. involvement.
If all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out.
In a surprising move, he proposed
the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Even relocating Palestinians to other countries, primarily Egypt and Jordan. Trump's bold suggestion of U.S. ownership of Gaza and the relocation of its residents faced criticism from multiple global actors, including the United Nations and European allies. Despite the backlash, Trump remained resolute, framing the U.S. as the stabilizing force needed to address decades of conflict in Gaza. Why is Trump getting involved in their conflict? Trump aims to take control of Gaza, citing the region's untapped natural gas reserves to reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy. Trump's approach may be more about real estate than geopolitics, with plans to turn Gaza into a luxury destination similar to the Riviera of the Middle East, a concept championed by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. A narrative has begun circulating suggesting that Trump and Netanyahu seek to evacuate Gaza to erase evidence of potential genocide. If such atrocities are exposed, both men could face international consequences. A scenario that would draw uncomfortable parallels to the atrocities committed by the Nazis against the Jews. India faces the daunting task of defending its borders on both the western and northern fronts, with increasing geopolitical instability, particularly with the growing strength of Pakistan, which is receiving J-35 jets from China. President Donald Trump's approach to foreign policy has often been marked by strategic arm twisting, where both friends and adversaries are pressured to align with U.S. interests. An example is the recent offer of the F-35 jets to India.
We're also paving the way to ultimately provide India with the F-35 stealth fighter.
Simultaneously, he unfreezes $397 million to monitor Pakistan's F-16 fleet, signaling to India that the U.S. could resume military support to Pakistan if India doesn't align with U.S. defense interests. Canada. Donald Trump's recent tariff threats and potential removal of Canada from the Five Eyes intelligence alliance seem to align with a broader strategy that may be aimed at weakening Canada's sovereignty and positioning it for future integration into the U.S. as the 51st state. His repeated threats of tariffs.
Canada has been ripping us off for years.
The possibility of Canada's expulsion from the Five Eyes reflects the erosion of trust within the alliance, further isolating Canada from its traditional partners. Greenland. Trump's ambitions for Greenland. It's increasingly clear that Donald Trump has ambitions to control Greenland. Despite the Pentagon's claim that it has no knowledge of invasion plans, Trump's refusal to dismiss military action keeps Greenland and Denmark in suspense, likely serving as leverage in his broader strategy. Strategic ambiguity in foreign policy. Trump's foreign policy, marked by unpredictability, also extends to his stance on Ukraine and Taiwan. His strategic ambiguity ensures rivals remain uncertain, as seen when he refused to disclose whether the US would defend Taiwan from China. An alarming article on Wikipedia titled, "Russian Interference in the 2024 United States Elections Sheds Light on a Sophisticated Campaign of Disinformation and Propaganda, Targeting Key Democratic Figures such as President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, while seemingly bolstering the political ambitions of former President Donald Trump." There are even allegations by former head of Kazakhstan's intelligence service, Alna Musayev, that Donald Trump was recruited by the KGB in 1987, during his first visit to Moscow. While not substantiated by any proof, these claims, when combined with Trump's unilateral talks with Russia over peace deals, not committing to security guarantees for Ukraine, even with the mineral deal in place, and threatening Europe to defend itself unless his demands are met, deepen the mystery around Trump's alignment with Russia's geopolitical ambitions. These actions have raised suspicions about Trump's alignment with Russian interests, particularly following his 180-degree turn in the UN on a resolution condemning Russian aggression. This shift signals a deeper connection with Russia's global objectives and leaves many questioning whether Trump's policies are unintentionally or intentionally advancing Russian geopolitical goals. Moreover, the possibility of a U.S. exit from key international bodies like the UN, IMF, and the World Bank under Trump could significantly empower Russia and China, further reshaping global power dynamics. His conspicuous silence on Taiwan's security could weaken the US's stance in Asia, leaving Taiwan more vulnerable to Chinese. Meanwhile, Trump's pursuit of Greenland complicates the situation further, adding another layer of uncertainty in the geopolitical landscape. Trump's foreign policy, marked by unpredictability, transactional diplomacy, and strategic ambiguity, has made global alliances more fragile and uncertain. His shifting stances on Ukraine, Taiwan, and Russia reflect a high-stakes geopolitical game that has left many world leaders wondering whether Trump's policies serve American interests or those of adversarial powers.